look out, cry for people who want a better planet.
And there are powers that be that let the people panic.
Look at the Gulf of Japan, could they have really planned it? Heading for the iceberg like the Titanic.
Atlantic mystery, Atlantis white from history. The truth about the pyramids in ancient Mayan prophecy.
Space Odyssey, look into the anomalies, and you will find suppression of free energy technology. A false democracy born out of a monopoly. Sacred knowledge robbery, like the towers they toppling.
No stopping free.
Jade brain, Vito C.
Coming from the inner me.
Free energy, the oil's running dry, our money's burning out.
Solar panels on the roof of the White House.
Hey, we bringing on some real change.
Water catchment system,
we collecting rain.
Time to gather round, the moment's now.
Have you been overcome with an irresistible urge to wash your potato? Have you been looking out at the world and trying to figure out just what the hell is going on? Well, you've come to the right place. You've come to the 100th Monkey Radio with Tom and Ramon, and we are picking up the pieces and putting them together and really trying to get a better picture of what is really going on. And I'll tell you what, we keep bringing in guests like the guests we have tonight, and we get another piece that we put in the puzzle, and it just makes another whole corner of that puzzle just stand out and really start to take shape. So, yeah, I'm really excited about our lineup and the people. Yay! And the people we've been having on, Ramon. I mean, it's, if you would have asked me a year and a half ago what I'd be doing right now as far as my part in the big play that we are all participating in here, doing a radio show probably would have been the last thing in my mind, and talking to all these amazing people and
tell me about it.
The growth, the personal growth that I know that both of us have had in the last, year and 2 months now, that it's just absolutely amazing. It's off the charts. So,
and I'm surprised how fast everything is just moving along too.
Yeah.
I mean,
we got another country too. I think it was we're up to 101 countries now. Malaysia. I didn't post it on the website yet, but it'll be there by the time this airs. But
Malaysia.
Yeah, welcome Malaysia. Yeah.
I actually really like that country. I got a chance to visit there several years back.
Yeah.
But anyway, want to just let everybody know that we have the 8 gig Little Monkeys out. We got them for $40, so you get the first month, our first month, which is 2010, the whole year of 2011. For 5 video interviews that we did, and we're putting in there the Book of Aquarius PDF and the audio.
Right.
So you can check that out.
Yeah, pick those up, guys. They're, good deal for $40. That you can't hardly buy an 8 gig stick for $40. So.
Yeah. Let's see.
We're
on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter, YouTube. If you scroll down on the page, you'll find Tom's. You'll find Tom's YouTube, and you can just click on that. Also, just wanna. Who are we using on? We're pre-recording.
We're doing. We're gonna use Free Energy by Luminaries again this week. So I just love that. I did that. We did that last week, and I just love that song. These guys are amazing. I'll be pulling in some more of their singles in the next few weeks. So look for these guys. Hey, check them out. Go onto their website. Go to their Facebook. Friend them on Facebook. Buy their album. I mean, these guys are really they're singing and creating art on some very, very relevant subjects. So it's good stuff, and it sounds awesome. So
yeah.
So who we got tonight, Ramon? Let's go ahead and get into this.
Just before we do that, I just want to talk yesterday. Talk about yesterday. I had a little situation where I got off the train and a gentleman had passed out on the platform, and me and several other people went over, and I put my hand on his heart and couldn't feel any heartbeat, and the guy started giving him CPR and giving him mouth-to-mouth why do I have a hard time with that word? Resuscitation.
Resuscitation.
Thank you, Tom. And then another girl was taking turns. And what really shocked me is that normally here in Japan, for those who you don't know, if someone faints, people would just walk by and not do anything. And that's very common here. You don't get involved. It's not your business. You just keep walking by. And I was really happy to see people actually caring. And people do care. As much as we think this is a cold world, people do care. And I was holding his hand and trying to give him energy. And then the ambulance came and picked him up and took him. So my thoughts and prayer with him. Hopefully he pulled through.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when it comes down to it, we're all just humans, and we do care. I mean, all of us care somewhere. So, I mean, I just, you know, I take heart in stories like that.
Yeah, but we have someone very exciting. I'm so excited to have this person on. Marcia Schafer, as a change catalyst, Marcia takes her audience into the unexplored as she transforms our understanding of the world around us along with our future. She prepares us for the special needs of the 21st century and this exciting time, and the highlights to her own personal experience, the truth of our extraterrestrial reality. Welcome to the show, Marcia. Yay!
Thank you for having me. Sorry to be here tonight.
Marcia, I got to say right off the bat, I know I told you this off the air, but your book, Confessions of an Intergalactic Anthropologist, absolutely touched me right down into my soul. That is an amazing piece of work, and I felt the energy come through that book as I was reading it. So very good job.
Thank you very much. You know, as I was sharing beforehand, it was a real surprise because when I wrote the book, I had not long before stepped out from the corporate world and had never revealed that side of my life where I'd had extraterrestrial contact repeatedly since the time I was born, not just an incident of, oh, gee, what was this? And I let so much information out about the details of what I had learned through years of observation and experience that I just, was so shocked at how well received it was. And over the years, it's been read in over 25 countries. It won an award the first 2 years it was out. It won an award from the publishing industry, a Glyph Award. And it amazes me. So now I go back to it, and occasionally I'll look at it and I'll go, oh, my God, did I really reveal that? Was I crazy? And I'll forget what's in it and go, holy goodness, what was I thinking? But it served its purpose, and a lot of people really enjoy it. So there's a few copies left in print that I really like to keep them for clients who come to take them into a deeper level of teaching. But thank you for the nice words about it.
Yeah. So was there something in your life that turned your head towards let's start here. Were you aware of the contact that you had when you were a child?
Well, yes and no. I never understood what it was. I always had these experiences since I was very, very young, since I was in the crib. But I was so young, I was confused, and I would come back, and they'd be the next day, and it would be, which is the reality that I'm supposed to be a part of. So what I learned to do was just to put it away and not deal with it, because I was a child who was born in the tail end of the 1950s. Back then, we didn't have anything to guide us or to let us know what was going on. I was born into a middle-class background in suburbia with people who, didn't obviously not only believe in that type of thing, it wasn't out or talked about the way that things are today. It was a very different time. So it just got put back away, and I never dealt with it really towards my 30s. However, I had come across several psychics when I was younger, and they always tried to tell me and prepare me for it, and I would get very upset and say, I don't want to hear it, I don't want to hear it. And they would talk about all the contact that I had and that, all the relationships that I had, and I would close it down. The other intriguing thing is, before my father died, when I was in my 30s, I had a conversation with him when I was starting to deal with this and to bring it out. And he shocked me because he said that he knew that things went on in my room at night. And I never expected that type of response from this man. And when I confronted him, he said, well, I didn't know what to do. It scared me. So I just, would never talk about it because I was a very scared child. And not only did I have extraterrestrial contact, I also was what I today as an adult will call a psyche child, a leaky child. A leaky person is somebody who comes in with the doors open to the other side. And so therefore all kinds of things happen to them. So I had, all kinds of spirit contact and things that, scared the bejesus out of me as a kid because I didn't understand it. So, it was put away and it was covered over, essentially, not knowing. I knew things happened to me, but I didn't know what they were because if there was no such thing as extraterrestrial reality, what was all these visits and these beings that were there, etc. So it was a very confusing childhood, but fortunately, God knows how, I turned out pretty grounded and was able to have a fairly normal life. And as I said, it wasn't until I really reached my third decade that I started dealing with these things and bringing them out to myself, let alone to anybody else, to be able to start to categorize it and say, all right, I have to approach this with some type of order in my life and figure out what's going on. And when I did that, there was a massive change in the nature of the visits that I had. I became more like an open student. I was paying a lot of attention. I was working within realms of my consciousness, and the nature of the experiences I had changed. As I said, it was more like I was taken as a student under their wing and taught things, where before it was more like experiential. Then I was taught things about time, space, concepts within the universe, reality, the soul, and it was as if the curriculum became more disciplined and ordered. The other thing I learned as I looked back at that period of time was where I had thought it was random chaos and the things that were happening to me. As I got these added elements of information at that point in my life, I was able to turn back behind me and say, oh my God, this really was a full curriculum. Now that I have these other pieces, I can understand what they were doing. And they were teaching me things and putting down layers of information that when I matured and became older, I would be able to synthesize them into a new understanding of reality and understand that it all fits together. I was amused when you opened up with saying that your show was about putting pieces of the puzzle together, because actually I've even publicly said, this is the foundation of really the work that I do, is that I'm trying to help people understand that it is a puzzle and that every piece gives us an altered understanding of an altered perception of reality that brings an enhanced understanding to us and what life is all about. So, as I said, as I got older, I began to understand a much greater scope of what was going on. And as a result, I feel that I've had a very enriched type of experience because it hasn't been, a helter-skelter, terrifying pickup experience that people talk about. I've had contact with many different species to be able to learn about the beginning peaks of what is out there in terms of the great varieties of life and consciousness. And I feel I've had a pretty good scope at this point of my life of getting an idea of what's out there into what I call the greater reality. So, that's what I actually do in my work, is I introduce people to what I call the greater reality so they can make better sense of these things that are often beyond our grasp, take it into everyday life, and have a new way of thinking to give a new empowerment to your life to be able to build a very different future for what we have facing us. So I'm into empowering people to think differently, to disengage from the traditional mindsets that are out there, from the traditional information programs that are out there that say this is what it is, this is what we're supposed to believe, this is what an established civilization or culture is all about, and to give them new pieces to be able to ask new questions to bring new answers to their life. And I turn them into humanitarian pioneers using the knowledge that I have from extraterrestrial reality and also the psychic abilities that I have that are fairly developed, along with bringing in, as the third part of the triad, my business experience, which is very extensive in entrepreneurial and corporate worlds and crosses many disciplines. So I reshape people into what I call little powerhouses who are seeding the future for us.
Yay!
Is that your equivalent of the ding, ding, ding bell?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's something I've gotten into the bad habit of doing. But I'm so amazed by your story because I've always felt that's one of the things I always wanted to study was and I don't know how to word it, so help me out here. Extraterrestrial sociology.
I think it's a good term.
Because I felt personally that when I was in my early 20s, I started to travel, and I felt that the more different cultures and customs you're exposed to, the more you realize that it's not different at all. And the more you learn and you become more open, and not to say anything negative about somebody who's never traveled, but the people who travel, no matter where they're from, you see how different they are and how open they are.
Oh, I'm going to jump right in, Ramon, because you were so right on in that. You know, I had my first taste of international travel when I was like 15, I think. And that was exactly, I learned the same lesson that you did. I was amazed. I thought people were going to be so different and strange, and it was the commonalities of humanity that struck me as a teenager. And I do agree with what you also said in terms of, I think that people who travel have not only a greater understanding, but, even a little bit more sophistication. And if I was in charge of society, it would be mandatory. I would require every single citizen to have to travel outside the borders at some point in their life and then come back if they wished.
My question is, for someone who's have exposure to so many different extraterrestrial cultures, what is the one commonality that you find amongst all those different races compared to the humans?
Well, I think that's a really good question. I think that one of the things is that they have a greater scope and a greater understanding of what life is really about. Now, when we have the human who's been confined to this planet for so long and has not had open doors of understanding about what's really out there, and any time they try to peek, it's been colored by institutions who influence their thinking, whether they're religious or political. When you have these other civilizations that I've seen, and remember, even though I've seen a lot of them, it's only a small scope. I have to remind people, it's only a small scope, and I can only talk about what I know. And this isn't the, all it is. It's just the piece I've been exposed to. But it's definitely that there's a greater awareness of what reality is like. Man is very limited by his concepts of space, time, the linear thinking of the past, the present, and the future being so static. Most of them that I've seen seem to have a greater understanding and aren't, as a result of that, aren't as inclined, I believe, to be pulled into dogmatic thinking that's influenced by institutions. Now, I could be totally wrong on that because when I have interactions, they're for a few hours generally. I'm seeing a small piece of the scope of what they are, and I'm also, if there's communication going back and forth, I'm listening to their bias as they're conveying information to me. I laughingly say, it's like a job interview. You're not going to tell people what you stink at. You're going to tell them what you're good at or what you think you're good at.
Right.
So, but one of the things that strikes me is, at least in my experience, is having that knowledge of what it's really like without all the veils that are hidden over this planet and keeping us into a directed way of thinking allows a real great power that we don't have. We have conscripted ideas of what a god is supposed to be. We have conscripted ideas of how we're supposed to behave to be good citizens, depending upon the country in which we live in. But, I think when you go out there, there's a greater understanding of that huge reality that has different universal principles guiding it in many ways that we often close our eyes to here or assign them to magical wishful thinking. That's been the most interesting thing, at least to me, is finding out that there are universal principles that I tend to liken to weather. It's as if you know the weather patterns on this planet, then you can travel with greater expediency and ease and, less conflict and know what to anticipate than if you don't know those particular weather patterns, whether they're wind or rain or snow or what the terrain is. It's like having a bit of a map. And so learning that there are these influences out there, these cosmic influences and tendencies and predilections that exist, makes life a little bit easier. I tend to like life sometimes as almost like a giant algorithm, and I don't always use my psychic abilities to know what's going to happen. Sometimes it is. I just know algorithmically, I know that certain things fall into place and that next step is bound to happen.
So what are some of these principles that are not in use here on the planet that are accepted in the greater cosmos?
Well, when I talk, one of the things I like to caution you is remember that, you're hearing things through my bias and understanding, and I could be wrong, but,
Right.
There doesn't seem to be, from what I was told a long time ago, for example, this one really blows my mind, is we tend to say past, present, and future, and it's immutable. I was taught a long time ago that they said that the past is not immutable, and that the past changes all the time, just like your future does. Only we're not aware of it, that our awareness capacity, our mental capacity, our mind tracks, almost like a magnetic resonance. It tracks a certain system of reality or events and synthesizes and puts it together in a timeline that is shared and collective. And everybody joins in who is on that same pathway and sees the same, what we would call past. But they said that actually there are multiple past pathways that are out there, and that in these different dimensional realities, things are not what we would expect. I mean, that has a lot of implications, even when you look historically just within the United States. Abraham Lincoln, the start of the country, some of the wars that we've had, World War II, economic conditions, etc. So the biggest thing underlying this entire premise that I'm getting to with the difference in time is the infinite realities that seem to exist out there in different vaults of time. And it's a matter of understanding this and tracking this that has implications for time travel. And in a way, I'm a little hesitant to talk about this because I'm talking about it, but I'll freely admit I really don't know all that I'm talking about.
Right.
Because I'm learning as a very simple human through experiences and bits of information that I've had of putting this together and reinterpreting reality. And it's not like I can go and I can say, all right, well, Harvard says this, and this, and there's studies on time travel. There's some research in that area, but it's all somewhat nebulous, and some of the information is over my head. So, it's a bit of a crapshoot, but it's fascinating to start taking your thought processes along those lines.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I have definitely run the gears quite a bit in my brain over time and the different timelines and parallel universes and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It goes deep rabbit hole.
It does. In that one aspect, I think, has some of the most potency and the biggest potential to change human reality, to move us away from a single timeline of understanding and to realize the potential that is out there. I think that will have greater impact than the breaking of extraterrestrial reality, finding evidence of lost civilizations. Our reframing the time-space equation, I believe, is going to be the ultimate catapult that will take man into the future where he can really change a lot.
Well, there's been a lot of reports from different other people who have had their contacts. And, we always do on this show, you got to take everything that we say and everything that comes through this show and use your own best discernment with it and, feel it out for yourself. Do the research yourself.
People who work with me. Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
But,
we're just adding elements and facets and pieces to it, and we're all learning together.
Right.
I have a bit of an issue with the people who come off as the ultimate authorities and things, and I just kind of silently roll my eyes and go elsewhere.
Right.
Because nobody is an ultimate authority. That's ego taking precedence.
Yeah. Well, what I was trying to get at here is I've heard from several different sources that all the multiple different timelines are kind of merging back together in this time in our history right now, and coming back to a more of a singular type timeline to go through this change that we're going through right now. Have you heard anything along those lines?
Not at all, not at all. In fact, when we talk about the change that's going on right now, that's a grand topic in itself, because first of all, is there a change? There are a lot of people who believe that there's a change, but if you go back to the majority of the population, people, I'll say like us, I'll make a brave leap and say, the three of us and your listening audience have a certain belief system, but we are a very, very tiny fragment of the population that's out there.
Right.
And, a large part of people see change, but, they see it more like, my 401k is kind of gone, my investments, they see it in terms of the life that they've had, and they don't really know what we're talking about. And I don't think even we know what we're talking about when we're talking about this change. There's no empirical evidence, but a lot of people are feeling it. I will tell you, with working with thousands of people around the world, I believe something is going on from the mere aspect of that. People from ordinary walks of life, not the people who've been born psychic or have had interest since they were a child, but people from ordinary walks of life, from all types of professions and backgrounds and interests, have had something happening to them over the past 18 months where they're looking at life very differently. They may have had direct paranormal experiences or, some type of extraterrestrial encounter or exposure, but something is happening to turn life on its head for them, so that they're thinking differently, looking at life differently, and having different expectations. And it's been amazing for me as, all these countries, this is happening to some scope, to some degree, all around. So getting back to the issue of the changes, you talk to some people and they say, oh, yeah, we're having a change, we're going through this dimensional field, and everybody's going to merge into a light being, and all kinds of falderall that's out there that has meaning to them and not to the greater population. We don't even really know what is the change, what is the impact of the change, if there is any. It's a belief system that many of us have based on how we're feeling and experiencing things.
Right.
And it's a bit controversial. And what I am strongly about is we talk one way amongst ourselves, but if we're going back in and we want to make change on this planet, then we have to learn to convey our ideas in a way that other people will listen. Because when people start hearing about us talking about change, they roll their eyes up in their heads, smiling, politely, can't wait to get away.
Right.
So I think it's incumbent upon us to start to talk about things in a way that we start opening doors of between different groups of people and saying that not there's a change or that, we're going into the light and, the dimensional field, things that can't be proven at all. We just start talking about it in ways in terms of we certainly can see that things are accelerating rapidly around the world, whether they're economic, whether they're scientific and technological, whether they are people all of a sudden changing in their expectations of what they want and demanding from people who are providing goods and services and the way that they're taking care of the earth, whether they're politicians. We need to start talking in a framework that allows us to bring the things that we are seeing and are being exposed to a greater degree to people who aren't having the same exposure, or at least be, here's my big word I always use, relatable, so that people will be willing to consider these types of things. But when you say there's a change or someone channeled information, well, that's worth the paper it's written on.
Right.
There's a lot of channeled information out there, and you've read my book, you can see I've experienced channeling too. But, how do you know that it's not like that great chat room in the sky, where somebody thinks, a man thinks I'm talking to this hot chick and he's talking to an inmate in a prison. You never know. I look at channeling just like that. You never know really what you have. We haven't gone into it, but I've had a lot of experience with spirits, spirit contact, the soul, incarnation, that whole line of knowledge. And there are many times, when people will tap into it's either their higher consciousness or some spirit gaming them or some intelligent essence out there that's really enjoying the ego ride. So, when people start talking about these things, we're going to be light beings and we're going through this doorway, what tends to happen is that ordinary reality really prevails and carries on for a lot of people. And, it just becomes another phase of belief that a group of people had. Now, you want me to get really esoteric on you?
Yes.
Now, with that other phase of belief that other people have is, wouldn't it be interesting if, with all these different timelines and realities that go on out there, if a certain group of people actually do undergo some type of radical change like that, but the rest of the population never sees it. The rest of the population sees it as maybe a loss of a portion of humanity due to illness or disease or, some type of apocalyptic type of thing, tsunami, etc., where the consciousness of these other people go through and experience just what they were expecting.
Right.
Am I making sense?
Yes.
I don't know if
yeah.
I'm making sense.
Yes,
Okay.
you are. Yeah.
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 So, I'm going through some different thought lines.
Yeah, I've contemplated that one myself. So I've had that conversation in my own mind. So we have, this whole group of, say we have, a couple million of us that are looking at this ascension process. Do all of a sudden this couple million of us just kind of sprout off into a different timeline, or do we all happen to be in the same place at the same time and get hit by the tsunami or the volcano,
or does nothing happen, or does nothing happen, and we go, son of a bitch,
Yeah, it's like, oh geez, what a sucker I was.
Because historically there have always been groups that have expected things, and there's some very fringy lunatic groups that you heard about on the news that the world's going to end on August 17th. I killed my pets. I sat down and I waited for it. Nothing happened. Oh, wait, I was wrong. It's November 12th. Excuse me. Come on, we're going to do it again. There's always been fringe groups, even though, more seriously, even if you look in the 1800s or any time there's been a turn of a century, there have always been fringe groups expecting something really major to happen.
Right.
And it never has.
Right.
It never has. So now, adding another part to the equation again, one of the things that's very interesting to me is the fact, however, that it's not, I think, I really don't pay any attention to the apocalyptic prediction people are doing with the Mayan end of days, etc. But what is of interest to me that's coming up is the astrological conjunctions that are out there, that there is supposedly, from what I understand, the planets are going to have an alignment that very, very rarely happens. And if that is so, then my mind wanders along the lines of, will this exert a mild gravitational pull on the planet if this happens that could impact weather patterns or something? So that's more where I'm thinking along those lines.
Yeah. Well, I look at we are electromagnetic beings. Our whole physiology is electromagnetic. And I look at the different things that are going on in the solar system and in the galaxy right now, as far as, our solar system is traveling so damn fast through the galaxy. It's just, it boggles the mind when you actually look at all the numbers, that how many miles an hour we're actually moving. It's staggering. And so we're going into different places, and the different, clouds of energy that we flow through, and the different energies that are coming off of all these different bodies out in space. We are electromagnetic beings. We're coming out of one side. We're crossing the galactic ecliptic, and we're coming out of one side, from one polarity of the galaxy into another polarity. If you look at the galaxy spinning, and if you picture the bottom, as you're looking at it sideways, you picture the bottom as having, say, a negative polarity, and you picture the top as having the opposite or the positive polarity. As we go through into that different polarity, that's got to do something to our physiology, got to do something to us, because we're electromagnetic beings and we're going into a different field.
I tend to agree with that. That was I actually wrote about that in Confessions of an Intergalactic Anthropologist. That was something that we had to consider as we were moving through different fields in space. So you and I are of some similar thoughts on that area, because that's where we go back again to weather in a way. There'll be different conditions that will be out there. And so how does this affect not only our consciousness, but could it potentially affect our biology? Radiation is one of the four key forms of mutation in the human body. What if there's some different types of radiation or cosmic impacts, cosmic rays of some sort that will start impacting the actual subtle biologies of the human body, or maybe not the human body, maybe some animal bodies and other species around us. So, what we're getting into, the main thing is the thrust of what I'm all about is we're starting to talk about thinking differently. And, what is so important right now is to ingrain intellectual knowledge and thinking with a good smattering of esotericism, I feel, and intuitive knowledge too, and bringing it together so that we have a new way to highlight what's going on out in front of us. Conventional thinking just doesn't cut it anymore.
Right.
I think it hasn't for a while. But with for example, when you compare the brain of our grandparents and great-grandparents to children being born today, it's been, and don't ask me where, it's been noted that the brain has been growing, and the learning curve of children today is much faster than that of 100 years ago. Do you think that has
the learning
to
curve I was just going to say, the learning curve being faster doesn't surprise me because we've been indoctrinated with technology, which our grandparents didn't have. I had not heard anything about the difference in the physiology of the brain. I find that really interesting. If you ever find that, I'd love to, share if you could share the link or the information on that, because that's very intriguing to me.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of the same, like the people who meditate and people who don't. For example, people who meditate, the gray matter around their brain is thicker, and their skulls actually change. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of information out there on that.
That's fascinating.
Where the actual skull,
I love that,
actually grows. So if you know any of like your clients or any of your friends that have been meditating for a long time, just run your hands through the top of their skull, your own skull, and you'll see, like, sometimes there's like, how if you ever broken a bone where it mends at, you have that what is it called?
It's a little bit rough, yeah.
Yeah, if you run, you'll feel that on your head for those who've been meditating a long time, and that's a proven scientific thing. So I find the more of us that are, meditating, and it's amongst the population, it's very common to think, okay, let's meditate or do yoga to relax. So the population is growing in a sense that they go to, how many people go to yoga class, how many people attend some kind of Tai Chi class or a meditation class.
The infiltration of the East into the West is a welcome thing.
Oh, yes.
Very much so, yeah. The other thing that interests me when we talk about meditation, et cetera, and this goes back to, I think it was Tom, you were starting to talk about some of these things in the beginning in the electromagnetic aspects of the human body, is that I think that also when we meditate collectively, that we share our energy fields in ways that are not always visible and are not always seen. And I think that this has great power, and this has to do with what some of the ancients used to call, I believe it's called an egregore, or I'm not sure if I'm saying it right, but, the collective energy of groups of people. And I think that there is something there. I'd love to see science moving more in the direction of these types of studies instead of the traditionally funded things. I know that there is movement in these areas, but I'd like to see even more of it in terms of the greater unknown. It's like the way the Old West was in the United States when it was starting to be settled and it was such exciting pioneering. That's how I look at consciousness and inner and outer reality right now. It's, like this new frontier.
Yeah, agreed.
New frontier.
Yeah, so we used to, when we first started this show, we called ourselves Conscious TV, and one of the questions that we asked everybody was tried to get their definition or their opinion of what consciousness is.
Oh, that must have been interesting.
So I'm asking that question: what is consciousness?
You know, that is one I really don't have a good answer for. You know, people often will default to, well, it's a self-awareness. But then you go, you know, well, what is self-awareness? And how do you know you're not even really just a machine, you know, that's putting out a holographic image? Oh, wait, that was a movie. You know, so I don't have a good answer for that because, like everybody else, I grapple with it too. You know, and
Yeah.
I guess I can say, you know, it is a self-awareness, but I also am involved in animal communication, and people talk about humans being only self-aware, and I think that's absolute nonsense. You know, the animals are
Agreed.
very, very self-aware. You know, I would not get the results that I get when I work with animals for behavioral modification if, you know, we didn't engage in these types of negotiating conversations and things.
Right.
You know, so, you know, but, you know, what can I say? You know, there's people who have, as we talked about, there's different populations. There's people who have, I'll just clump us all together and say, you know, look at the world like we do in terms of infinite possibility. And there are people who look at the world in terms of this is what it is and this is what it will be. And, you know, I think even going back to the issue of consciousness, even if those two people were to answer it, you'd get some very different things. You know, I could give you some scientific didactic, but, you know, like everybody else, I wrestle with that question. And sometimes I think, you know what, I don't really care. It is what it is. I'm not going to explode my head around, you know, those questions. They're fun, but there's a point where you just go, does not compute, does not compute, does not compute.
Right.
One of the things I've been finding, it's funny you bring up the subject of animals. I've been finding it a lot, and I don't know if it's because of Facebook, but I've been seeing more and more pictures of certain animals that, according to society, you know, I guess animals have their, you know, their own stereotypes, shouldn't be getting along together. So, for example, I see pictures of a parakeet and a cat. You know, the cat's like sleeping with the parakeet, or a dog and a kitten. You know, and I'm seeing more stuff like that, and even in nature where we can say, okay, that might be influence of man, but then in nature, there was a story of a lioness found, killed the mother buffalo and found the calf and actually raised it for, not completely, but raised it for a while, and gave it milk and everything. And then of course, the male lion came back. That's a whole different story I won't get into. But
yeah, I know this. Well, no, I know what you're referring to. I know the story, yeah. But, you know, are you getting at, you know, the fact of seeing all of a sudden that we're seeing different relationships between the animals that we haven't necessarily been exposed to before? Is that what you're addressing here?
Yeah, I'm addressing at the changes I'm at least just starting to notice between
is it
in
that
the animal
or
kingdom alone.
yeah, is it that or is it just something that we have not been exposed to?
Right. Yeah. So there's always those two sides of the coin in terms of what you just said. Is it that we now have, you know, methods to document and delve into these types of relationships that are breaking apart what, you know, Ramon, what you were basically alluding to, the cultural fixations we've had on the way that relationships are supposed to be, or, you know, is this something new? I personally tend to think that, you know, the relationships within the animal kingdom are very different than man has contrived them to be, and that, you know, they will see whether you want to call it, you know, since we can't call it the humanity per se, but they will see that universal soul or life force, and there are times when the primal switch kicks off in them, and the feral instinct goes down. And when I'm saying that, I'm referring to like dinner,
Right.
And
Yeah.
they will relate to each other. And where I suspect it becomes very strong is probably within the maternal instincts of the females, such as you will hear stories of them taking in the young of those who have lost their mothers and giving them the milk, bringing them up, taking care of them, and taking them in as their own. So, I think there's that whole piece that has been ripped away from man as he's been told that, animals behave in a certain way. There's something very provocative, though, when it comes to animals and consciousness that's very, very political behind a lot of this, is you have to remember that we eat animals. And, people moving into the realm of giving them the consciousness that they have challenge the food industry to some degree. People don't like to remember that they're eating fluffy.
Right.
And so, there's the whole radical aspect of the food, chickens, cows, etc. If we give them the sentient life rights that they deserve and should have, then we bring in the whole aspect of the food industry, and it becomes a whole other pickle to deal with. So, bringing up the aspect of the consciousness of animals, and I'm a huge animal advocate, and I work in animal welfare and animal rescue, and I'm all for that. But I also am aware of the underlying political contentiousness that can be affiliated if we make so much headway into society. I would love it if we lived on a planet where there were really nutritional aspects nutritional foods that tasted good, that weren't flesh. I hate the idea that I eat human flesh. I do eat it, but I mean human flesh. God, I'm not.
Wow.
Animal
Okay.
flesh.
There's a
Yes, that's my off time. But to me though, it's the same horror. It's all flesh. It's the most horrible thing. I eat it. I am not a vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian at times, and I've had nutritional difficulties with it. So, but I just find it totally abhorrent. And wouldn't it be great if we had this, something terrific that wasn't fattening, it was healthy, vital, and nutritious, and we loved the taste of it, that we could all of a sudden move to as our major food source.
So, have you come across any beings out there who have? Now, I've heard of races that basically absorb their nutrients from their environment.
I do not know. It certainly seems possible. I mean, look at it here. We have plants that use photosynthesis.
Right.
To, get their nutrition from it. So I have not gotten into much of that type of information or anything, but I think it's totally possible and totally plausible. I think that there are a lot of things that we don't know or understand. I don't think, for example, we tend to think of carbon-based life forms. Then there have been those which I don't think are at all. And I've seen, some very strange things out there that, even when we start getting into artificial intelligence and things that I don't have enough knowledge to be able to really quantify. But I've definitely seen things that I call them synthetics, is my own personal name for them.
Well,
go ahead, Tom.
Well, I was just going to talk about those guys in India who have. This is some documented stuff about these guys that say that they haven't eaten for what's that one guy 14 years?
Oh, the Indian fakirs, yeah. I've read a lot about them. I've never seen it, but I've read a lot about them. That they can go extremely long periods of time, and this goes back to the Indian mysticism. Where we hear about these ancient masters that could lay their bodies down for years and years and years and years, and then come back and reclaim the body and go into it and do the work they had to.
Right.
Fascinating stuff. I am one of those people. I have an intellectual mind, but I am fully willing to suspend my understanding of reality and embrace new ideas and things and concepts like that. That I say, wouldn't that be cool? I hope it is true.
Yeah.
I was gonna go into I'll give you an example. Whenever I start a class and it's a brand new student, the first thing I start with them is, what countries have you traveled to? Now, instead of asking you what countries you've traveled to, what what species have you met or planets you've been to?
Okay, before we start that, I have to say that one of the things they taught me early on is that the names are sometimes for our convenience.
Yeah.
And, they don't necessarily mean anything or make sense, but they're given to us for it. Let's start with some of the species that are out there. And what I tend to do is I tend to use some of the names that people have already assigned. Are there life forms that are those little gray beings that you see in the Steven Spielberg movies pretty much? I've seen several, but I actually think that there's different variations on that particular, I don't want to say brand or life form that are out there. And they don't always match up. My experiences with many of the life forms don't match up with what's in the literature and what people say about them. Are there reptilian species? I've had direct face-to-face contact with, definitely with reptilian species. Here's where I always like to stop and say, though, that I get really annoyed at the people who channel, who have put into the alternative literature all these things about the horribleness of these lizard reptilian species. I've never encountered anything like it. Does it mean that it's not out there? No, but I've never encountered anything like it. They've talked to me about their offspring, about their civilization, about having arts and culture, the equivalent of that in it. They talk about how important it is to them that with the offspring they realize that is the future of their tomorrow and their generation. They've been so surprised at how we don't understand our relationship to the planet or how to live strategically for tomorrow on the planet. So it's never been these types of blood-eating reptilians who are invading the White House or, the Queen's Palace or these wars and these Draco wars and all these terms that people have applied. I've never experienced any of that at all. So when I look at the reptilians, I look at them with respect as another species. There are definitely humanoid ones that are very much like us, that I feel that we are probably very strongly genetically related to. People tend to call these the Pleiadians. I use that term. I don't know if it's correct or not, but there's definitely part of this large humanoid family that's out there. But beyond, I know I could go into, numbers of different ones, but I'll tell you what my greatest interest is the ones that are not extraterrestrial, but what I have termed multidimensional. And
Right.
These beings are so further along on the spiritual awareness pathway is the best thing I can call it. There is a different feeling when you're in their presence. When I'm in the presence of an extraterrestrial, I'll have all kinds of, biological symptoms and stuff. Sometimes, depending on who it is, I can feel their hair on my neck, or I can feel what I call, I don't know if this makes sense, they're terms I come up with, and a lot of times I find out they're actual real terms, like a phase displacement as the dimensions are warping. All these types of things that happen, but that never happens with a multidimensional. It's almost like being this rapturous spiritual experience. And they're so far advanced, these beings, that they have this almost ancient wisdom and love that you just emanates from them. And these are the highest, most masterful teachers. And whenever I or anybody, has earned the privilege of being in their presence, it's really an honor, I feel, to have time, if we want to call it, or an interlude with them, because they're very masterful and they teach you about wisdom. They'll give you information, and and a lot of people get a lot of bullshit from extraterrestrials too. And it's not to say that I haven't either. We didn't go into that part. We can talk about that a little later. But there's a difference between information and bullshit and channel bullshit and wisdom, and being taught how to think, and being taught how to appreciate, and how to develop the love within yourself and your understanding, of others. That's what has really, I've shifted my focus in the last probably, 20 years to really being interested in that, and have, moved away from my real interest in what's called classically extraterrestrials. Because I said, you get a lot of bullshit from extraterrestrials.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
I think
The world's going to end on, November 21st. Run for the hills, an asteroid's coming, or dear ones, little ones, clean up the planet. What, we need to, hear that? That's really profound. Obviously, duh.
Yeah. I always say that it's the same as meeting people. People are different, so it always bothers me when you take a race,
Put
a
them on a
species,
pedestal.
yeah, or just group them all in the same group, like
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, and there's this whole the field they call it, ufology today, or
Exopolitics.
exo something like that. Yeah, yeah, and there are many people who come forward with this platform. They're all good. They're all bad. They're here to save us. They're here to eat us. You're a liar. You're a truth teller. It is such a waste of time,
Yeah.
for one person to be purveying an ultimate reality of all of this. We just need to take all of the experiences that people have, all of the information that we can glean, put it together into a pot and say, some of it filters out better than other stuff in here. But it's all in here. Some of it we're going to give a little more credibility to, some of it we're not. But it's all in there, in terms of this major research, in terms of getting back what has been stripped from us, which is our awareness of the fact that it even exists and that human is not the only intelligent being out there. We don't even recognize the intelligence of the animal kingdom. But apart from that, I get very tired by people who are so dogmatic of, they have the answers, this is what it is, listen to me, buy my book, come hear me speak, aren't I entertaining,
Right.
about this, gee, you're a bad person because you don't believe the same way. It's really infantile, and that's why I'm in, the line that I'm in, because, I really don't have any interest in that type of thing or being a part of it.
Right.
There's some very good people out there doing research and trying to find the answers, but the minute you start switching to providing the answers instead of offering information, I think you've made a big mistake.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we are at the top of the hour, so we want to give you an opportunity to share where people can get a hold of you and find your material at.
BeyondZebra.com. There's an entire website up there. You can get the information about the book that's up there if you're interested. You can read part of it online. You can find out exactly how I work with people in the sessions. All the information is up there. And, just a quick word about that is that it's not a classical, it is not a psychic session. It is an empowerment hour where you learn how to think differently and how to grab all the elements of your life and see if you want to move forward in a new way, whether it's professionally or personally. And so, it's not a classic, does John like me? Should I buy a red car? It's, how am I going to move my life forward? What can we do about it? It's real tactical work.
There you go.
Making that very clear, because but it's at BeyondZebra.com. You can tell I'm rather a unique personality, basically I believe in, life is about having a lot of fun, so we have a lot of fun in the sessions while we're also working through a lot of the things that are blocking obstacles. And, all the information about extraterrestrial reality is something that I'm very happy to share with people. And I also help them understand about penetrating into the silent world of animals and understanding how they communicate, make headways there. So BeyondZebra.com is where you can always find me.
Great. Okay, well, we'll delve into some of your the work that you're doing now in the second hour here. So I want everybody to hang tight here and listen to Brooks Agnew coming up next, and then pop on over to the members section and check out hour 2.
Which is www.the100th, make sure you put the TH, monkeyradio.com. And
condemnation.
Thank you for all those becoming members.
Oh, yes. Thanks, members. Condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance.
The love you deny is the pain you carry.
Yeah.
And yes, Tom, I looked at my arm.
All right. Namaste.
Have a good night.